Welcome. We are here for the first virtual network meeting of the Michigan Farm to Institution Network for 2022, and we'll be looking back at some of the work we've done over the last 8 years now, and the impacts that it's had, and then look forward to the work that we're intending to do in the future and the framework that we are hopefully going to use to do that. And this is one of the very last kind of steps along that path to formally adopting that framework so that we can get moving with some of the work of it. So welcome. So to get us started, before I move into the agenda here today, just wanted to also introduce the members of our management team from the Farm to Institution Network who are bringing this meeting to you today. My name is Colleen Matz, and I am going to be facilitating this meeting today. I'm the coordinator of the Michigan Farm to Institution Network and the director of Farm to Institution programs at the MSU Center for Regional Food Systems. And Noel Balacek of the MSU Center for Regional Food Systems is going to be our moderator today, tending to the tech issues chat box. Noel is also with the MFIN management team and our value chain specialist at the center. And then Garrett Ziegler of MSU Extension Community Food Systems team and the MFIN management team will be our note taker today. And maybe as we get started here, I'll ask y'all to introduce yourselves in just a second. Agenda review first. So we'll do some introductions of those of you on the call here too, and connecting, and then we'll review just a couple of important dates that we want you to take note of. And then we'll turn it over to a couple of guest speakers who are going to talk about a case study called Michigan Farm to Institution Past, Present, and Future and what they found. And then we'll do a review of the framework that we're using to chart our course in the years ahead before we adjourn. Okay, so with that, I will ask you all to do introductions as well. Could you, in the chat box, introduce yourself with your role and your affiliation, please? We'd love to see who's here. And no problem if you can't use your camera today. This is a way for us to know who's there.
All right. Good to see some folks from KVCC. Mariel, welcome from the management team. Jamie Molnar from Department of Education. Welcome, Jamie. Let's see. Reed, welcome from Eastern Market. Phil, good to see you. And we have Lilly from U of M. Great to have you, Lilly. And let's see, Andrea, welcome. Good to have you on this meeting. All right, Crystal also from KVCC. And Sarah from the Kidney Foundation. Megan, Leslie, welcome everyone. And Phil Berto, great to see you as well. So good group today.
Yep, and we're expecting some more, hoping for some more, but as it always goes, you know, things come up with this busy crowd of folks. So we're glad you could make it and join us today. So my next question to you is just a little icebreaker to get the conversation going. I have been thinking about spring with this weather lately, and I was actually lucky. It was my birthday on Saturday, the 65-degree day down in southern Michigan. So I got to enjoy that day outside. which got me thinking more about springtime because I found myself, hiking without a jacket on and having a beer flight at a beer garden outside, things that I did not expect at all for my birthday. So what are you looking forward to for spring? What's one hope you have for the change of seasons and the start of spring?
Yeah, more in-person gatherings, Leslie. Absolutely. Lindsay, vitamin D and sunlight. Yeah, a little sunlight would be good. Yeah, Phil, 2 feet of snow on the ground. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. Biking will be great. More hugs. Yeah, more in-person gatherings, green things outside, sun on my skin. Kind of borrow one from another parent I heard recently. I'm looking forward to less layers. Makes it easier to get out the door when you don't have to put on like 40 different sets of clothes. Yeah, fewer daycare germs. Yes, layers. Yeah, early sunrises. Yes, all those things will be great. Soon enough.
Soon enough. Next week is looking good down here. I don't know about you all up in the UP there, Phil, but good luck to you.
Got another 6 weeks or so, I think, Phil.
Yeah. They're hardy, right? All right. Thank you for that. So a couple of events that we wanted you all to note. Our friends at the Michigan Food and Farming Systems organization is hosting their Family Farms Conference coming up. That's March 16th through 19th, and that's virtual. So take a look for that. I believe registration is still open. And then our big news is that, and this is the first time you're hearing this, is that we are going to have a Cultivate Michigan marketplace coming up in April. This one will be in Grand Rapids, and Garrett is one of our organizers and will be our local host for that meeting. So Garrett, would you mind sharing just a little bit about it?
Yeah, no problem. So this is going to be similar to, maybe folks have been able to make it out to one of the regional Cultivate Michigan Marketplaces events that we held in 2018. I think we had one back in 2019 as well. But it's just going to be an opportunity for farmers, food suppliers to meet with institutional buyers. So we're definitely looking for participation from 10 schools that have received 10 cents a meal, schools and ECEs that have received 10 cents a meal funding that might be looking for people to connect with. And I think it's going to be 4 to 6 in Grand Rapids at Blandford Nature Center, which is kind of on the northwest side of Grand Rapids. So it's a nice spot, and we'll have more information, registration available next week.
And these are intended to be regional, as was mentioned. So we do, and so it's important to note too that we do have a number of these events that will be coming to other regions of the state in the next year and a half-ish. So if Grand Rapids, West Michigan isn't your area, then stay tuned because there will be a marketplace hopefully coming to a region near you in the near future. So we're looking forward to that, and please do help us get the word out, especially if you've got other networks to share this info to. Hopefully we'll have a save the date coming yet this week, registration next week, as Garrett mentioned. So that's exciting. All right. Wanted to just check in with all of you. Are there any other events of note that you would like to share for the good of the group? Feel free to either let us know, turn off your mic, or turn on your mic, or type it in the chat, please. Sorry for the slides.
Colleen, I have one.
Yeah, hello, Melanie.
Hi, everybody. So the West Michigan Growers Group is going to be having a growers fair this coming Saturday at the downtown market from 11 to 1. And so there will be lots of growers there, and it's geared primarily towards consumers, but I actually was able to get 10 cents a table there. So we're going to be doing some just general outreach to the public about 10 cents a meal, as well as to some farmers who are there. So just as a little plug, another Grand Rapids region area thing. So
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Melanie. And I will mention that the Growers Group is a partner on our April 11th.
okay, yeah, and I think I put it in there, but yeah, let's connect more about that because that's the first time I've heard about the marketplace and at Blandford on April 11th. And I'm in Grand Rapids now. I don't know if you know that, but so I'm local. So
Cool.
yeah, let's connect more.
Breaking news, Melanie, just here today, breaking news.
Breaking news, yes.
Yeah. And it looks like we've got another one in the chat there.
It looks like Mariel shared the Michigan Ag Ideas month-long virtual conference is currently underway. Link there if folks want to check that one out.
And then of course there's that producers training at Valley Hub too. I don't know if you already talked about that one too, Colleen, at the end of March, I believe.
We didn't.
There we go. Crystal.
Thank you, Crystal.
Did you want me to speak about it?
If you would like to.
Oh, okay.
I was giving you a minute also to find that link. But yes, we would love it if you would speak to it. Thank you.
Yeah, I might have to dig back through my emails to find the link. I think we're up to like 18 or so people and we have room 4, I believe. So it is a pilot program. So if it is successful and we feel the need to duplicate it, we can do it online or in other locations across the state. So just wish us luck on the 21st. And if you know any growers who could benefit from coming to the Food Innovation Center on the 21st to learn about ECEs and the different ways to partner with them and different needs that they have, feel free to send them our way. It is a free event and there's actually like a small stipend they'll get for participating. So they'll get a Visa gift card sent to them after the training. So thank you for the link, Mariel. Let me know if you have questions.
Thanks, Crystal. And I think we've used the term a couple times already. So just for everyone to know, ECE is Early Care and Education Sites. So they're tend to be smaller in size in terms of the number of children they serve and can be really good places for beginning farmers or farmers who are new to farm to institution to get their feet wet. So this will be a nice training opportunity and it's based on a national training curriculum that's been developed through some funding with the USDA. So that's also something that we hope to use in the coming year for another training for farmers on selling to K-12 schools. So we have that in our sites for this year as well, but probably in the winter, maybe December of 2022 or winter of 2023. So more to come on that too. Thanks, Crystal, and all who are putting that one on. I know that's been a big group effort. Any other events for the good of the group? All righty. Hearing none, I'm going to move on, but feel free to drop anything into the chat if you think of it. Okay, with that, I am going to transition over to our guest speakers today. They are the 2 authors of a case study on our Michigan Farm to Institution Network. And as I mentioned, there's the title, Michigan Farm to Institution Past, Present, and Future. So the authors are Lilly, Fink, Shapiro of the School of Environment and Sustainability at the University of Michigan, and Lesli, Hoey of the Urban and Regional Planning Program at the University of Michigan. They are part of an evaluation team that does some evaluation work for our Center for Regional Food Systems. So this was one of the pieces of that work that they've been supporting for work focused in Michigan. So I'll turn it over to you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Colleen. Thanks for that intro, and hi to the whole MFIN crew. Thanks for having us here. It's so satisfying to now be here talking with you all after many of you were actually interviewed for this, what became this report back in 2020. So it's so nice when things come full circle and we get to actually kind of present back to you all what we heard from you back in 2020. So that's really what we're going to do. We're going to share an overview and the main findings of this report, and then lead into we'll talk about where MFIN has been, kind of where it is now, and then lead into where it's going, which is going to launch into the conversation that I think Colleen will facilitate with you all after this. So this report, it really documents this evolution and the long-term impact of MFIN. And the idea is that it will offer you all, network members and the leadership and management teams ways to build on the accomplishments of the network. And then also it creates lessons for folks around the country or perhaps even world who are working on this kind of work. So we'll get started. We'll tell you about kind of what we did here. So many of you were interviewed. Again, we did 27 interviews in 2020. That's a lot of what this is based on. You'll see a lot of quotes that are anonymous in the following slides. We looked at 8 surveys. We reviewed a lot of MFIN related documents and publications. And the way that this is going to go, Leslie and I are going to ping pong back and forth. The report is structured like this. These are the sections. And so Leslie will start with talking about the launch and growth section, and then we'll just kind of go back and forth. So Leslie, to you.
Great, thanks. Yes, and thank you all for inviting us here. So the first thing, just to make this a tiny bit more interactive, we wanted to see how many of you here that are here today have been part of MFIN since it launched in 2014. Just put in the chat if any of you have been involved that long. Well, Colleen has. That's not too surprising. Jamie, anyone else? All right, Bill, Crystal, Noel, Garrett. And as Lily said, a number of you were interviewed for part of this too. Great. Well, especially for those of you who have been part of it since it was officially launched in 2014, then you probably know, and also those of you who work at CRFS, you probably know that CRFS, has been involved in looking into and understanding farm to school and institutional sourcing efforts in Michigan long before the MFIN actually launched. So as early as 2004 through 2014, CRFS was conducting surveys, at least 6 surveys to understand the landscape of farm to institution efforts in Michigan. And CRFS produced some resources and reports to promote farm to institution sales. And in 2013, they did one study that found that the majority, almost 90% of school food service directors that they surveyed were either already purchasing local foods or were interested in doing so. So it was really obvious that there was a lot of momentum and interest but even before launching MFIN. So officially it launched in 2014, the network did, and it was a collaboration at the time with CRFS and the Ecology Center in Ann Arbor, and it had support with MSU Extension. And Cultivate Michigan was also launched in 2014 as a way for food service directors and buyers to pledge their commitment to reach 20% local by 2020. And the Ecology Center and CRFS co-managed MFIN until about 2018 when CRFS took over. And you can see here on this timeline, all of this comes from the report that for several years, MFIN held in-person meetings with the Food Hub Network. One time in 2017, it was with the Food Hub Network and the Local Food Council Network. And then the first time there was an in-person meeting just for MFIN was 2019. 2016 is when 10 cents a meal, the pilot launched, which really helped to accelerate the need for MFIN. In 2018, MFIN held its first series of Cultivate Michigan Marketplace events. It's great to see that still going on. And that was in conjunction with the Michigan Department of Education. And then 2020, that's how far we went in our case study. And at that point, Cultivate Michigan membership hit 228. And you'll see in the next slide that membership has gradually increased both in the network and the listserv. That's how we're kind of measuring membership. Or at least people have joined the listserv steadily over the years, almost 10 times as many in 2020 as were originally part of it in 2014, from 70 to 650. And Cultivate Michigan has also increased from 21 members through to again, it's 10 times as many in 2020. And the growth there is slower, which makes sense though, because Cultivate Michigan requires an active commitment by institutions to do local food sourcing and especially tracking and reporting. Though, a lot of the materials for Cultivate Michigan are available on the website. So even non-members are probably using the resources. And I think, one thing that came out of our interviews about why MFIN has continued to grow over time is just because it's been, you all who are part of the leadership have really helped make it a very responsive network, responsive to changing needs and interest, and that it's been, as some people said in their interviews, it meets members where they are. It's very nimble, open to better ideas, rethinking things as you go. And so that adaptability has really created a space that a lot of people have wanted to become a part of. So, and one thing too, we noted here is that, the membership and the listserv has kind of begun to level off a little bit. I mean, there were still 100 people that joined between 2017 and 2020, but that over time, there's also been somewhat of a shift in terms of not just growing membership, but also really strengthening existing relationships starting around 2017, 2018. And then of course, COVID, which will come into play in other parts of the case study, also has had a major effect, but so I don't know what's going on since 2020. So yeah, after that, let's move into leadership and engagement a little in more detail.
Great. Thanks, Lesli. So Colleen, I'm glad you didn't ask us to actually send you these slides ahead of time, because I thought you might kill us for this one. But first of all, I will just say that we did not ask interviewees, hey, tell us what you think about Colleen Matz. We asked broadly about people's response to leadership and how it went. And then unprompted, completely unprompted, there was just, I think someone said, there was my favorite quote was the mad respect for Colleen Matz. So she did not know we were putting this in here, but I'm just reflecting the data and what we found, that there was so much positive feedback about the leadership and well-run meetings and, tight agendas, and how MSU plays this anchoring role for the network. And so you all know that MFIN has a management team. Well, I guess I'll give the historical management team of 7 to 8 members, which is both CRFS and MSUE educators. And then the advisory committee started with 8 members and then grew to 14 farm to institution practitioners. That happened in 2020. And since 2014 has engaged, there have been 26 different people on the management team. So as MFIN evolved its structure and its strategy in 2018 and 2019, the subcommittees transitioned from a public-facing role to more of an internal organizing tool. So I know that those structures have changed a bit over the years. Now we asked a lot of questions about the makeup of MFIN membership and also who's missing. And the clearest theme that we heard, and again, this is of course unprompted in interviews, but that close to half of interviewees talked about the biggest missing group being farmers or growers, and just wanting more representation from farmers or growers. There was some reflections that schools were the first adopters of MFIN, followed by hospitals and healthcare settings. Demographically, MFIN is similar to other CRFS-led networks. We're not surprised that there's a lot of white women involved in MFIN and many other of these types of networks around the state. And you'll see in these images that interviewees also talked about other groups that were missing, but the clearest theme was farmers, although some did say they wanted larger school districts or more senior care center participation, more folks from the grocery sector. That was the, whoopsies, sorry. That was the clearest theme. Okay, I don't expect you to read all quotes, but we'll just share a highlight of some of these. And I don't know, so it's all anonymous in the report, but we did just say what role folks had. So in terms of, yeah, so people suggested that the grocery sector be more involved, correctional facilities, large school districts, smaller scale distributors, senior facilities, produce distributors, and restaurants. So, and I wonder if now removed, if some of you, it might be some of your quotes, but you may not even recognize your own voice. That's always an interesting thing. So I'll read one of these. This on my screen. It always felt like we were not a very racially diverse bunch and probably more female gendered, and that the farmers that come are white farmers and tends to be a lot of women involved. It's like any kind of local food event. It's really female led. It's really white. We've seen that specific profile for sure. Okay, I will pass it back to Lesli to talk more about strategies.
So we divided the different strategies that MFIN has used over time into kind of three types. Lily, do you want to move on to the next slide real quick? We looked at this in terms of kind of low hanging fruit, middle hanging fruit, and harder to reach fruit, which I'll explain in a minute. So the first, for the low hanging fruit, these are things that were, a lot of different activities that require very little time, no travel, or other forms of commitment for people to participate or engage. So this includes virtual network meetings or webinars, maybe using, the online electronic resources, the listserv, making use of printed materials that MFIN and Cultivate Michigan produced and distributed from 2014 to 2019. And a number of people really referred, talked a lot about these materials. About half of the interviewees talked about how useful those promotional materials were from Cultivate Michigan. They would feature 4 local seasonally available foods each year. So throughout that time, they featured 24 different foods, and it included toolkits with recipes, marketing materials like posters, signs, window clings, stickers to promote the foods. And people found the materials so useful that some interviewees wished the promotion toolkits could be provided again. And these are just a couple of quotes from some people that use them in their schools, like in the lunch lines or in their menus, in other ways, and how useful they found them. For middle hanging fruit, we're mostly talking here about the apple crunch, the cherry slurp, and the cucumber crunch. And these were, can you move on to this forward slide, Lily? This middle hanging fruit. This started in 2014 when MFIN started supporting the Michigan Apple Crunch, and it was a way to celebrate the local apple harvest every October with school groups or government officials, farmers. I think we did one once at a Good Food Summit. And when, some people were really creative with this. One school held they did this around their fall festival, and they even got a drone to take a picture of everyone on the football field crunching their apple at the same time. Another interviewee talked about how after they participated in the first apple crunch, they were so committed and worked with their purchasing director to make sure all of their sites, I can't remember exactly if it was a school district, but making sure all of their sites were sourcing Michigan apples year round. So a lot of people felt like it was a really motivational activity that linked people. And recently, MFIN participated in the Great Lakes Apple Crunch, where there were 6 states crunching on the same day for one big regional crunch. So that was so successful that then MFIN was inspired to start the annual Michigan Cherry Slurp in 2017, featuring frozen cherries to draw attention to Michigan cherries, and also the summertime cucumber crunch in the first time in 2019. And then the last group of strategies that we categorized were those activities that take more time and maybe some travel and bigger commitments to engage in. And so these were things like the in-person events and meetings, the MFIN tours, and the Cultivate Michigan marketplace events. A majority, 19 of the 27 interviewees thought that in-person events have been some of the most successful strategies, even though they take more commitment, but that these have really helped increase engagement and commitments to local sourcing. And many of them really loved the tours in particular, but they also felt like they probably were least attended and sometimes just because it takes so much more time to participate, and especially a lot of travel depending on where you are in the state. But when they did participate, they felt like they were some of the most meaningful in terms of really facilitating connections between buyers and suppliers. So now we'll move on to impacts.
Great, thanks. Okay, so we heard a lot from interviewees about how MFIN has really changed the culture of local procurement in Michigan. And we distilled what everyone talked about to these following categories. So one of which was raising awareness about Michigan agriculture and the benefits of local sourcing. One of creating a community of practice that values local sourcing. And then the third piece of educating stakeholders about how to communicate and collaborate across diverse sectors. So we'll go through each of these here. Okay, so this first part of raising awareness, MFIN has helped the concepts of farm to institution be more widely known. This is something that people weren't really talking about so much before MFIN existed, but MFIN has definitely gotten the ideas out there across the state really effectively. And I think that they've given tremendous support to all the organizations interested in moving this forward. And we picked this quote to show you because it's representative of what we heard from a lot of folks across the state. And how MFIN has also, we heard, helped to build this imagination of what is possible. And then this community of practice, like today on the call, that is just, and one major accomplishment of MFIN is just being connected to people all throughout Michigan who care about this work and to have the network. And someone said that a lot of things are called networks, but don't operate like one, but that MFIN really does operate like one. And then the third piece is cross-sector collaboration and helping for institutional buyers and farmers and growers to communicate, and how MFIN has done a really good job of trying to educate farmers and for there to be farmer education geared towards institutions to bridge that gap between these various industries that might not understand the restrictions of what the other one is going through. And so we heard quite a bit about that in terms of the impacts of MFIN. And I know MFIN has also been working on having an equity focus. And one person shared a really powerful, their personal adventure in equity and their personal journey, that one of the biggest takeaways they got from that MFIN 2019 gathering was about learning about how the food supply supports or fails Indigenous peoples of Michigan, that made a really huge impact. And then also they learned a lot about, now in their work, they're really looking to support minority-owned producers or minority-run cooperatives, and they attribute that newfound appreciation and awareness of that work to MFIN. So we thought that was worth calling out. Okay, Leslie, I'll pass it back to you.
So we also asked about, what have been the biggest challenges, either the MFIN as a network or to just continuing to try to make more advances around local food sourcing. And there were kind of 5 main areas that I'll go into in the next slides. So the first one is around data collection and tracking. And this was unprompted. We just asked open-ended, what are some of the biggest challenges you've seen? And about 44% of the interviewees spoke about challenges associated with data collection and really measuring progress around local sourcing. Since many institutions and distributors don't really already differentiate what products are local, it requires a lot of effort to begin tracking that component. For others, the issue is a lack of time and capacity to complete surveys and request for data. Some broadline distributors also don't give permission to share this data. And this quote just was from a government employee who felt like, and at least one helpful thing around data collection was when the state is trying to get applications for national school lunch to program, the national school lunch program applications, they were able to insert some of the questions to try to help track this, which made it a little bit easier, but it's a major challenge in terms of capacity and even, again, especially when working with broadline distributors, being able to get access to that kind of data. Another challenge, second one, was around COVID-19, not surprisingly. And, you all probably have lived this and most closely, or partners you work with have gone through this and maybe still are, that the harvest, a lot of people talked about how the hardest hit were especially larger farms that typically sell to wholesale markets, who had established contracts with major institutions or who sold to major distributors. The school closures and colleges and university moving online to online instruction, sometimes closing their dining halls or severely limiting how much they were offering to students, or frankly, I think some schools even in Michigan completely closed their residence halls. But all of this meant that, schools, universities, colleges weren't buying the same quantities or types of food that they were in the past. And many schools stopped serving meals altogether. And then many just agreed that the pandemic has put local food sourcing on the back burner, or did for the first year. It's a little unclear now because this went through 2020. But at the time, it felt like local sourcing was really on the back burner. The people were food service providers were just trying to survive. And a lot of the focus, at least in K through 12 schools, was really shifting immediately towards emergency food, which is a whole different ballgame. And some really feared that the pandemic might even reverse local food purchasing progress that had been made over the last years, and just basically said, it wasn't a priority right now. So I'd love to hear what people think now when we get into the discussion about if things are still in that same place, or if things are really starting to look up and changing, or if anything has been a permanent change. The third challenge that some people brought up, not everyone, but this was around tensions or just disagreements, different opinions about MFIN's role or commitment to working with large scale versus smaller scaled farmers, distributors, and institutional purchases, and where the attention should be placed. MFIN's official stance is to work with all levels, to get more local food moving through all channels to all types of institutions. So only 9 people out of the 27 that we interviewed talked about this, but out of those, 6 people were really strongly in favor and saying like more needs to be done to try to work with large broadline distributors. And one person that you see here very strongly did not, and has a longer quote in the report, thinking that corporations have a clash in values with what MFIN's values are, what they think MFIN's values are. And 2 people were kind of lukewarm, but brought it up as a potential kind of source of tension or disagreement. And those who argued for engaging corporate distributors just suggested that these institutions are just too embedded and too large to ignore, and that there's huge potential. If you can move these companies, then we'll have a much bigger impact on local food procurement, and that it would be a missed opportunity to not engage them more. And then others also brought up some other issues more around the challenges we still need to pay attention to in terms of small scale producers to sell to institutional markets, and some of the major barriers that tend to be actually geared towards the larger farmers who are better resourced, can deal with the institutional payment systems that are oriented to larger growers with greater cash flow, or that can adapt to the food safety requirements for institutional markets. So it was kind of on both sides still in the overall discussion. The fourth challenge that several interviews brought up is just about a real need to really think about not putting all your eggs in one basket, in single MFIN champions or local food champions, that they are incredible and they're really important and we need to find those champions, but that it's also really critical to ensure that there's an institutional wide commitment, because once those people retire or they leave that position, it can be really challenging to keep it going at that institution or that school. And as we saw, with COVID, because of budget cuts, staff layoffs, there were some champions that were lost in that process. So that's a real challenge to still keep thinking about how do you institutionalize this commitment beyond individual champions. And finally, some people also brought up that we have to also keep paying attention to policy challenges and barriers, and keep that in the back of our minds, because that can still create some barriers too, or can create opportunities, as we saw with 10 cents a meal. But it also, there was a moment where there was a real challenge around 10 cents a meal when there wasn't enough attention, I guess, placed on it, and some of the funding was lost for a while, and then it was reinstated later in 2020. And so it just demonstrates that that's something that you have to keep focusing on, because it can be a major blow, to the amount of funding that's going towards local food. And then I'll turn it over to you to the last part, Lily.
Great, thanks, Leslie. All of a sudden it's not advancing. Okay, well, I'll just talk. Sorry, guys. Okay, well, this last part, maybe I'll just stop my screen share.
Yeah, you might stop the share and restart it.
If only my computer would let me stop the share. Nothing. I'm still not frozen. Maybe, Colleen, you can just put a blank screen on there if you want. There's not much. You can just take it away.
I think I can stop.
Okay, that's fine. It's fine. I can just talk anyway.
Oh.
I really just want to share some of the key takeaways. So, and in conclusion, and that'll just lead us into the next part of this meeting's discussions. So here's big picture. What we found is, one thing is that having an anchoring institution and this inclusive leadership approach has been really key to MFIN's success. And one thing is that it's so clear that MFIN has taken, and we think should continue to take, this tiered approach to engagement. That was that image with the tree, with the low hanging and middle hanging and hard to reach fruit, that offering a range of opportunities like that and having events that require different levels of involvement has been instrumental to MFIN's growth, and has, everybody can find a way to engage. And so that's been really important. And so in order for MFIN to expand and deepen its work, we think it'll be important, or we found that it'll be important to move beyond these individual farm institution champions. And it's funny because I think when I hear farm to institution champions, it sounds like a really good thing. And in some ways it is, but you can also see how from a systems level, it can be problematic to have more of a champions and less of a systemic institutional presence. So moving away from champions and towards this institutional policy that values local purchasing, or really, you can really have both, but moving towards the institutional policy is key. We found that MFIN should continue to engage with producers and buyers of various scales, while simultaneously addressing ways to support the unique challenges that smaller scale producers and buyers face, and just making sure to support that size. And one of the biggest hurdles in advancing the MFIN work are the challenges associated with data collection. That was the clearest challenge that we heard from all of the interviewees. And so more strategies are needed to support producers and institutional buyers with the data collection and tracking. And more recently, especially MFIN's priorities and prioritization on diversity and equity inclusion, it sounds like has really resonated with MFIN members. And so moving forward, an effort to also diversify MFIN's membership and leadership would help to expand its reach and impact. Some members also spoke about the need to look beyond local and to also incorporate other values. People brought up things such as workforce and labor standards or sustainability practices. And so looking ahead, or maybe this will be a part of today's discussion, but we wonder if MFIN might consider trying to find strategies for institutional buyers to balance these competing priorities. So those are some of the key takeaways. And then this last point is that really just looking towards the future of MFIN, and I'll read a couple quotes for you. Big picture, people said, I really hope the MFIN continues. I know that that is a shared sentiment, and not necessarily indefinitely, but it's what is now. Some form of support for farmed institution and the state level continues. I think it has been a really powerful force in Michigan, and it's a big reason why the state has been able to make such strides in that area. And then someone said there's a lot of sentiments like that. And then the need for more work also came up. So someone said that there's a lot of cheerleading with all these big numbers, but never big numbers of institutional sourcing, but that we don't that much look at these big numbers in comparison to the actual total budget. And so we're saying, oh, it's so successful, but we should really look at it and says, okay, we've done this much, but we still have a lot to do. So I think, those are some points for discussion maybe for this next phase. And if you want to read, you can check out the full report. There's a lot more quotes in there. And I'll just leave it with Lesli. So it sounds like interviewees shared that it's so clear that significant progress has been made in Michigan with local institutional sourcing, and that many also feel like Michigan still has a long way to go until the local sourcing becomes the default. So there's a case that there's more need for the continuation of MFIN. So with that, I would love to open it up, or I'll pass it to Colleen, but love to hear what you all think, what resonated, what didn't resonate. And then I'm hoping that this will morph into this discussion about the future of MFIN. And I think if you have questions, you can either unmute or you type them in the chat box, either way.
Yep, please do. Thank you, Lily and Lesli. And yeah, I'd love to hear the same questions and just a general sense of, do these results resonate with your experience with MFIN, if you have much experience with us. And we'll go into some of what we're going to look at going forward, which builds off of this. So I think you set it up well in terms of a transition too, Lily. Mm-hmm. So maybe the first question is, do these results resonate with you? Maybe just a thumbs up, thumbs down, or a yes, no in the chat. What do others think? And as my follow-up to that, and Crystal, as a newer member, thank you for the vote of confidence. We agree. I think we heard loud and clear that MFIN should continue to exist somehow, and how we operate can continue to evolve and adapt and change. So we'll talk a bit more about that. And what do you all think has been the most important role or contribution for the Farm to Institution Network so far? We heard from Lesli and Lily some ways that the network has changed the culture of local food procurement in Michigan. I've been using that in presentations elsewhere, but would love to hear from you too, based on your experience.
And Colleen, I can share a couple more things that might help stimulate more conversation. And this, feel free to share in the chat box if any of these resonate with you. We also asked interviewees to share suggestions for MFIN and to get ideas, and so we compile them in this list. So I'll read off this list you heard, and then you can share if you want to jump off any of those for conversation, feel free. So some people said, and these weren't so much themes, these were more like one-off. People had a whole range of suggestions. They weren't necessarily, the same. It really varied. So somebody said that MFIN should engage school children and families more, and that would be a strategy to increase local sourcing. Someone thought that MFIN events should charge participants. Another person talked about diversifying the advisory committee. There were a lot of ideas for MFIN expanding partnerships, and people had a lot of different ideas about what those partnerships should look like. So I'll just read off some of the varied suggestions. Partnering with the Michigan Farm Bureau, partnering with commodity groups, animal welfare organizations, MFIN having involvement with sporting events and a deeper level with correctional facilities, and even MFIN connecting more with food trucks. So again, if any of these spark ideas for you, you can feel free to talk about it more. Another person talked about MFIN engaging more directly with policy advocacy. Someone thought MFIN should focus more on food waste. Someone thought that in each of the MFIN newsletters, MFIN could feature a BIPOC-owned business. Another idea is to expand the MFIN awards to include a food service director and also strengthen MFIN's social media presence. So those are a range of ideas. Perhaps some of them were from you, but if any of those resonate, good idea, bad idea, you have something to say about it, feel free.
I think from my own standpoint and experience as one of the people who's been with MFIN for a good long while now, we did at the very beginning of Cultivate Michigan, well, not maybe the very beginning, but around 2016, we did try to actually count the number of institutions in Michigan. And that alone is kind of an impossible task because it's a constant moving target. And I'm sure those numbers are very different now, especially after the pandemic too. I was just looking at those numbers last week, and there were almost at that time like 10,000 early care and education sites around the state. And I'm sure those are much fewer now. And our school district numbers have decreased a little bit, but just the counting gave us a sense of what the universe is around institutions. But there is a lot then to be done in terms of getting to a total spend by those institutions. So I think that's something that maybe we could look at again in terms of maybe setting another baseline in understanding the universe of institutions. And we are definitely, as a network, looking to engage more on the farm and food supply chain side of things in the coming years. I think we can probably all agree that we have gone a really long way so far in terms of building demand for local food among institutions. There's certainly more to do there. And we need to build up the supply chain and the capacity of farmers and food businesses who want to sell to institutions to be able to do so. So that's part of where we are going to focus a lot more in the coming years. I have I wonder about the expectation of farmers engaging, not in that they should be engaged. Yes, they should be, but do we expect farmers to make time to come to meetings like this? I don't know if that's a reasonable expectation. So I'm trying to also think about, what are the right ways for different people to engage, and meeting going is not for everyone. Thanks to those of you who are here with us today. But in some spaces, I think we can attach that maybe to the type of event in terms of who we expect and who we prioritize to be there for our own purposes and organizing it and in reviewing it, but also then communicating that back out. Those are some of my own thoughts.
Thanks for bringing up sort of the market development piece, Colleen. That was sort of where I wanted to take a comment, and I think that is a really important role that MFIN has played, and I think that's a interesting and good shift going forward for us to really think about how we are impacting the demand and the supply chain for those foods. So we did, there are a couple of the comments and questions in the chat, but if somebody else has something to build on that, feel free. Otherwise, I can read something off from the chat.
I'm working on answering Megan's question in the chat also, if you want to note some of the others.
Sure. So the one I was noticing is Crystal's question about liking to hear more about the lasting impacts from COVID and how stalled work from 2020, 2021 is getting ramped up again in 2022, or changing scope with institutions and growers. I mean, one example is the marketplace events, which we just put on hold for a while. And so just bringing back those sort of in-person activities is sort of the most obvious example, but yeah, there's been a lot happening with funding and federal dollars for school foods, as you all know. So I know that's definitely taken a shift in focus and some additional resources. So
I had a really interesting conversation about it's just an anecdote or theory that some school districts in Michigan were able to adapt, the ones that were able to adapt most quickly, pivot, as we like to say in COVID, were those that had more diverse and more local and regional sourcing. And the ones that really rely almost exclusively on large broadline distributors, national distributors, were the ones that were most impacted, because quite often those distributors were shifting to the contracts that were more lucrative and bigger, or with grocery stores and when they didn't have, especially when they didn't have enough truck drivers, or if they weren't able to distribute all the food, or if they had food supply problems, then schools were often kind of on the short end of the stick, which I think is a really interesting question, to look into. I don't know if anybody's looking at that, but that would be a really powerful story to tell about the need to try to diversify more and try to get more sourcing locally and regionally, so that institutions are more resilient when there are disruptions like this.
And it looks like we've got a note from Jamie on that too. I was going to ask her if she was in the place to talk about it, but she gave us a chat response on some of
I can talk.
Hey, hi, how are
I
you?
just didn't want to talk over anyone, because I think Leslie's last comment was probably like from me, that we did see food service
with someone
directors.
else. So I'm glad to
Oh,
hear.
was it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's even better than that. Someone
Yeah.
else saw that. So
Yeah.
if a food service director for schools anyways, if they were used to only purchasing from one source, they didn't know how to pivot. I know we all hate that word, right? But I'm going to use it. And then those that were already purchasing from different types of vendors and food processors were able to find and source food, lower cost food. Some were donated, like we saw food donations. It was kind of amazing. But unfortunately, and going back to my comment, we got to a point where schools were doing like curbside distribution, or maybe they were eating in the classroom. And so they got really reliant on individually wrapped foods, a lot of processed food. And at the time it was like, you do what you have to do, especially as staffing was a big concern, or deliveries or shortages or whatever it was. But we're really going to start focusing on meal quality in general. It's still a challenge, because there's still a shortage of staff out there. So people are even having a hard time like with canned and frozen, just because it takes staff time to like open the can and put it into another like container. I know that sounds crazy, but so that's going to be our focus at the Department of Ed, is just kind of getting back to what is a quality meal. How can we get you back to like actually preparing food? And part of that will be sourcing local. Plus, obviously, if food prices are just going to keep going up. I don't think it's going to get better. I don't know if Colleen, you were on that call yesterday with industry call. We talked about grains and where grains come from Europe. So we're just going to have to start looking at local sources. And actually, I think we're probably in a good space, right? Here in Michigan, we're going to get our soybeans and things like that still, but other areas might not. Sorry, I'm rambling now just because it's been kind of a crazy day in regards to even waivers and things for school meals. So we're kind of like in this weird space.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation, Jamie. I love hearing from the institutional side. I had an intern here from our dietetic program talking about some of the challenges for schools and some of the supply chain disruptions. And I was like, why haven't they come to us? Like, we need to be there as like a fallback option. If they know a shipment isn't coming in, it'd be great to fill in where we can and help schools still get some food. So that's what kind of spurred my question. So it's good to hear from you as well.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. And we can absolutely connect on that. And we're trying to build some different resources just to kind of help folks along, because sometimes they just don't know where to start if they're always ordering from, 2 or 3 places. We just need to help make those connections, I think.
And we definitely try to in the spaces that we're able. So I know that I connected recently with some 10 cents grantees with KVCC who are looking for more local food sources. So it takes time, and it's kind of a very individual activity, except when we are able to do things like our Cultivate Michigan marketplace events, which I wonder if we will see really high attendance for those in the coming years, partly due to all of these supply chain challenges. And I think people who have been plugged into the local food space know that that's helped to carry some others through if they've not been personally affected by it. But I do think, yeah, there was a certain point at which it seemed all of the industry and economic conditions caught up to the local food supply chain as well. So it helped as a way to get people through for a longer period of time. And it's just rough out there for everybody right now. Any other thoughts or comments? All right.
Real quick, I don't know that it's kind of hinted at, but just for me and someone that's been involved with the network for a long time and put a lot of effort into developing resources and technical assistance things for institutions, it's been really interesting to see the impact that 10 cents program has had on drawing in more institutions. I feel like for a little while there, it was, a lot of outreach to institutions, how can we help you? And not always like a strong response of this is the help that I need. And now it seems like it's kind of been the other way around, where we have more institutions reaching out to us with how can you help me now that I have this money from 10 cents a meal that I have to spend. So it's been nice to see kind of the ability to say, like, we can help you. We have all these resources. We have like lots of experience in doing this. So it's been good that we have all that in place to support a program like 10 cents because it is a really innovative program, and the more support it gets, the better off it'll be.
That actually would be really interesting to look at states. I know, Colleen, you're helping to begin to try to, share lessons about 10 cents a meal to other states that are interested in adopting it. It'd be really interesting to see how other states that don't have a network like MFIN, who haven't been trying to think about these challenges for years before 10 cents launches, like how, if it takes them much longer, and I wonder if they would maybe even lose momentum, after getting the funding to get institutional buyers on board as quickly as Michigan likely has, because of the experience you've all already accumulated. It's an interesting point.
Yep. yeah, I think that can be maybe one of the characteristics we look at in the places where there are local food incentive programs like 10 cents. So that's a national project that I am involved in with some other folks around the country. And that also gets me to thinking about, I think, and maybe as Phil mentioned too, the Michigan as a whole and our other networks also have made it so that we as a state have a really good communication system set up and a really good network of networks where we can connect and collaborate across and between them when and as needed. So with the new USDA local food purchase cooperative agreement opportunity that came down recently that MDE is taking the lead on, we have, they know there are ready projects out there for these funds to be well spent and to really make a difference. So the approach they took was to see what those projects are and what they want to do and bring them into the fold as much as they're able to. And other states, as we've heard through some of our national communications, may not even be applying or using this money at all. And it's millions of dollars that they may then be leaving on the table. So people were looking to Michigan and to MDE specifically in that case for, a really good model of how to do this kind of work. But it's because we've got these systems in place and communication in place already that's on the, wouldn't say it's easy. MDE folks would kill me if I said it's easy, but it's ready. It's ready to go. And we're all connected and we know how to connect. And I didn't mention this even to our own team yet, but I was invited to speak on a USDA roundtable last week on Thursday through the Agricultural Marketing Service. And they were highlighting the farm to institution focus in the new round of USDA LAMP funding, including the regional food system program grants. And they wanted to highlight a state and then they wanted to highlight a national network. So they brought me in to talk about our work here through MFIN in Michigan and how ready then we are to support grantees in applying for this type of funding here. And they had Healthcare Without Harm as the national organization representative. So that's just another indicator of the good work that we've been able to do and the communication and collaboration infrastructure, as we call it, that helps to support all of this work across the board. And that's getting us noticed is one thing, but it works is what we found here at home too.
Not to mention the person from Australia that's coming to talk to us.
Right, yeah.
About MFIN and our farm institution work in May.
That's a student who's studying us. So
They should invite you there once they let people in after COVID. Yeah. What's her name? So the director of Food Lab, Davita Davidson. Yeah, she was invited to Australia, I think twice, to teach them about the Food Lab model. So there's a relationship starting there.
Garrett will be first in line, right, Garrett? All right. Well, with that, I am going to wrap it up, kind of pin it there so that we can move on to the next piece, which I will make as brief and quick as possible because I think we are in a place where we're ready to wrap this up, charting our course plans for going forward. But I think it was really helpful to have this conversation first, talking about everything we have done and what we've heard that we should do as we get into what we are planning to do going forward. So thanks, Lily and Leslie, again.
Yeah, thanks again for having us.
Yeah,
welcome to hang, of course, for the rest of the meeting. All right.
Good to see everybody.
Good to see you. So before I move into this next phase of our work, I wanted to just give a quick shout out to our advisory committee for 2022, and you'll see them all listed here. I'm not going to name them necessarily, but these are practitioners out in the field who are doing farm to institution work, and we've kind of set it up over the years so we have like a seat per practitioner type. So you'll see there are a number on the food supply chain side of things and a number of folks on the buyer side and some in between. So this is what our advisory committee is looking like for the coming year. And I know we had Filiberto on earlier. Oh, he's still there. So we've got Filiberto on the line who will be participating, and he is part of a couple of organizations, including MIFS. And Reed, who's on the line for Eastern Market, will be supporting Christine Kwan in that effort. So this group has really served as our guide for making sure that we're on the right track with our MFIN activities. So given these folks are out in the field doing this work, then they're kind of that touch point for us to make sure that our activities are what they should be and that we're responding to needs as they come up. So I wanted to give them a shout out because they were really instrumental over the last couple of years in developing this framework in particular, and that's exactly the kind of work that we look to them for. So with that, I'm going to transition into our framework for the coming years, and you'll see that I'm not putting an end date on it because we don't have one, and I hope that you can be comfortable with that. This is just our guide for the coming years, as we're saying, and we can have some checkpoints along the way and certainly adapt and adjust as needed. And as you've heard, we're pretty good at that. And we have a number of pieces still left to decide. So we have the basic frame that can help guide our work, but we haven't gotten into all of the nitty-gritty yet around some of the details, activities, tracking, etc. So those are still things that we need to figure out. But this has been quite a process already. So I just want to give you a sense of that too. So as Lily and Leslie reminded us, we had a purpose that was to help institutions meet the 20% by 2020 goal of the charter. That's what we were founded with and launched with. And we were a space for learning, sharing, and working together to help farm to institutions grow, the Cultivate or farm to institution programs grow. The Cultivate Michigan campaign helped us do that over these initial years. And I think we will still have a Cultivate Michigan campaign of some sort, but it's going to look a bit different. And we will still have all of the materials and resources that we have developed available as well. So more will be coming on what Cultivate Michigan becomes in the coming years, or adds. I would say it's additive. It's not going to take away from anything that it has done in the past. So here is the process that we used to get to where we are today with this framework, as I've been calling it. And you heard Leslie and Lily mention our MFIN gathering in November of 2019. That was our last in-person gathering, I guess, and we were lucky to have it. And it was the first one we had as a single network since the launch of the network itself. I think we had a pre-launch and a launch meeting 2013 and 2014, but then we had done a lot of events with other networks too. So that was a chance for us to really gather up our network specifically and get some of the feedback that we were interested in gathering from members like you about what we should do in the coming years. We also heard some more feedback through a virtual network meeting in October of 2020 that was part of the Good Food Summit series. And then we had a number of MFIN advisory committee meetings over the years where we were sharing out kind of drafts of this information and getting feedback back to perfect it along the way. So I worked with them over a good long while, and there were times in the middle of 2020 where it was just too much to tend to and too much thinking required, where we just kind of had to pin it because these are practitioners that we're working with who are certainly on the front lines of this work too. So then we organized that information. I won't go into all of those details, but we are to the point now where we, as an advisory committee and a management team with MFIN, decided to move forward with the framework that you will see here today. And we wanted to get any last feedback from members of our network through a survey. And then this is another space to gather any more of that last feedback. So consider what all you're going to see to be a very close to final draft. So if there are any major concerns, we can stop and kind of address those as a group. Maybe not today in this meeting, but we can. And we will get back to you on that. But if we don't hear anything more like that, I think this is where we're going to move forward, and we'll be getting this out more publicly soon. So as I mentioned, there are a number of things still to be determined. So just hold on to that. And I ask you to kind of be okay with that uncomfortable place of not knowing what all the details are just yet. But this is the kind of map to guide us. So think of it that way. So I think the easiest way to share this is through the member survey results that we gathered, and Megan McManus, who's on the line, helped to develop these slides. So appreciation to Megan for that, and she conducted the survey. So you'll see here that we heard from 25 people. You can just see the percentages of their years of experience with MFIN, but we had 25 respondents, and they were from, I think, about 15 counties all across Michigan, including the Upper Peninsula. So variable experience with MFIN, which is what we always want and expect to. And then here's what our respondents looked like in terms of their roles in the food system, is how we look at that. So pretty good diversity there too. So you'll see here the mission that we're working with. And that is that the Michigan Farm to Institution Network helps people across the farm to institution supply chain learn, connect, and collaborate. So that's building off of some of the values and kind of the roles that we heard were most important about our work. And generally, we're hearing from members through the survey that they are satisfied with that mission. Some are not quite so sure yet, but we didn't hear any no's. So I think we're okay to move forward with the not so sures and the yeses there with this mission. And then this takes a little more time to look at, so I'm gonna pause here, but we wanted to hone in a little more on some values. So in the past, our work really focused on local food, and we still want to maintain that as a primary leading value of our work, but we did want to build in some of those broader values that are important to our members and to us at this time, and with where we are in terms of the pandemic, the economy, climate change, all of those things coming together. So, and social justice efforts, etc. So you'll see that we are trying to uplift a few values here in particular, and we wanted to describe what they mean. So we do that here. We have definitions. So I'll give you a second to take a look at the first set, and then there's another set on another slide. So we describe here diversity, equity, and integrity. All right, I'm going to move on to the next. These are a little simpler. Local, environmental sustainability, and business viability. And we've been taking steps along the way to make sure that this at least syncs up with the Good Food Charter. So just wanted to note that, and I think the values are a place where that is clear. So with those definitions in mind, we asked about those values and if they resonate, and we heard yes. Everybody but one of our respondents was not satisfied with those values, but the one that did respond did not supply any additional information or language or response. So we don't have much we can work with in terms of that one. So that's another one I think we're okay with moving forward with what we have here. And then we have here our roles. We support institutions that are responsible food buyers and community members and regional food supply chains. And we can still be that space for learning, sharing, and working together to help farm to institution programs grow. And again, we heard that our members who took the survey were satisfied with that. In terms of strategies, these are strategies that we've heard that we do well, that people look to us for, and that we, I think, enjoy doing, honestly, as a network. So collaborative problem solving was kind of a top level piece that we heard from our advisory committee. Networking and connecting, those are kind of the same, but a little bit different depending on how you look at the spaces that we do that. Some of it's one-on-one, some of it is in bigger network spaces. So I wanted to acknowledge both of those. Capacity building, I think, is a big part of what we can do and focus on. And that includes resource development, as we've done in the past, educating, storytelling, and tracking. So as I mentioned, we're not sure what all of the activities will look like underneath these strategies, but we heard, generally speaking, from our members that they are satisfied with these also. So I will pause right there to see if there are any thoughts, questions, or comments on those results or concerns about the framework language in general. How's it feeling? How's it looking? I'm excited about it. Okay. Not hearing much feedback yet. We've got a little chat. Thumbs up from Phil. Thank you, Phil. I know we're almost to the end here, so I will certainly wrap it up. But I do think it will be an exciting time for us as a network to also learn more about these different aspects that are really important for farm to institution. So we'll certainly need to be reaching out to many of you who are experts in your fields to learn more as we go. And that's the way I think that we've done this work best too, is to learn by tapping into experts in the field, and to learn by helping and assisting, and then taking that and putting it into kind of practical information and guides that really talk about the how-to. So I think a lot more of our MFIN meetings this year will be focusing more on those how-to pieces, including on some of these newer values that we'll be taking on. So in terms of next steps, we will be updating our website language with a new framework, this new framework. And I think now we're going to go ahead and do that. That's exciting too. That kind of is the official wrap up of a long process. We will be transitioning our Cultivate Michigan website. We'll keep the URL, but it will look a bit different in the future. So I think that will be a this year project. But we just wanted you to know we may not be adding so much to our website in advance of transitioning it. That's a functional purpose on multiple levels, but something that I think needs to get done. And this is a good time to do it as we're starting on a new framework. We will be working on prioritizing activities that further this framework and these values. So if you have any ideas or topics that you would like us to focus on, or that you could share with the group more broadly, we would always love to hear those. And we'll be building a new tracking system to follow along with those values. Not quite sure what that's going to look like, but pretty sure it's going to be much more streamlined and simpler than our previous tracking system through Cultivate Michigan. And then we want to maintain that focus on storytelling and really uplifting the stories of our members. They don't all have to be bright and shiny, and we can learn a lot from mistakes. But that's something that we, I think, have done well and would like to continue. And Zaire Parati, who's our data manager, she's been focusing on doing some podcasts and checking into that. So if we could do some faces of the network features in terms of audio recordings instead of features on the website exactly. So we will keep you posted on all of these activities. But all of that, in short, is to say there is going to be a whole lot more coming soon that's new to us and maybe new to you, maybe not. And you can keep an eye out for that in the near term and in the long term throughout the year and in the coming years. So we don't have our full calendar ready yet for this year, but we'll be working on that. And we wanted to be sure to get this framework straight before we proceed with all of that. So stay tuned for more info, and we really appreciate your participation today. And I believe that is the last thing I have. So right on time. Thanks for joining, everybody. It was good to see you. And thanks to those of you for hanging through our whole meeting today. We appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.